Okay, so to first start your extra little hanging trinket project, you're going to pick a shape to trace. I think I'm going to do a little gingerbread man. Okay, so you want to double up the thickness of this brown paper. So I'm going to take some, fold it over, not too far, press the folds, and I'm going to trace this gingerbread man, being conservative of the paper. Notice that I'm pressing down next to where my pencil is so that I don't move the stencil around. I hold the stencil down as I reposition my hand so it doesn't move from where I first traced it. Okay, almost done here. Alright, so there we've got our shape. Once we've traced it out, I'm going to take scissors, not shears, and carefully cut out the 2 layers of gingerbread man. A helpful hint to make cutting easier is to cut out the small square around your shape so that you only have to work with a small piece at a time. This makes it much easier to cut out your shape. Alright, so next step is picking out the color of embroidery floss that you want to use. There's plenty of options. I'm going to use this nice dark purple. Now, when you go to use embroidery floss, you'll notice that one end has a tail that is loose. This is the end you are to pull from. So simply pull on that tail and it will neatly unfold a strand at a time. Now we want 1 arm's length of embroidery floss, just like you did when you hand stitched your pillow shut. So once you've measured that, go ahead and trim one. So at one end of your embroidery floss that you cut out, you'll notice that embroidery floss is made up of 6 smaller strands. That's actually a little too thick to work with. So you want to split it up 3 and 3. So I'm going to take 3 strands in one hand and 3 strands in the other. And when we're splitting this, you want to pull it apart very slowly. If you pull quickly, it will form a knot. Sometimes you have to pick it up off the ground as well, so that the bottom thread or embroidery floss can unravel. So carefully pull it apart. Alright, so now you have 2 strands that are 3 strands thick each. With one of those strands, you're going to untangle it, and you're going to take one end and pinch it between your thumb and pointer finger and wrap the strand around your fingers. And you can save this in your bin for later, or you can give it to a friend who needs that same color. Now with your other 3-strand thick floss, you want to take one end and we're going to thread the needle. First thing you want to do is trim the end so that you have a nice clean edge. Next step, just like when you hand stitch your pillow shut, you want to pinch the end of the floss between your pointer and thumb fingers so that you see just a little dot of color. Next step is to line up the eye of the needle over that little dot and open up your fingers as you carefully push down the needle so that it is threaded through the eye of the needle. You'll go ahead and pull it so you have a tail on either side. So once you have your needle threaded, you're going to have one end or one tail that is shorter and a longer tail or end. At this longer end, we're going to tie a knot, just like how you tied when you hand stitched your pillow shut. First thing you're going to do is make the shape of an awareness ribbon, like cancer awareness or something like that. Next thing you're going to do is pinch the intersection of that ribbon. Next step is taking that tail behind the loop and up through the loop. Grab that tail, and with your other hand sort of push and pull that thread so that that knot forms close to the end of your tail. And you want to do this twice so you have a double knot. So again, make an awareness ribbon, just like that. Pinch on the intersection, tail behind and up through the loop. And this time you want to be careful so that you push the knot so it lands right on top of the first knot that you made. So now that you have your needle threaded, you have a short tail and you have a long tail with the knot at the bottom of it. This is where your little cutouts come back into play. So I'm going to just take one of the cutouts and I'm going to go in about 1/4 or about 1/8 of an inch into the gingerbread man. And I want to pull through. Now when I pull through, it's easy to pull your needle off of the thread. So what I like to do is take my pinky and ring finger and wrap them around the tails so that when I pull through, I don't pull the needle off. So I did just one layer here and my knot's on one side, threads through on the other. At this point, I'm going to take my other cutout of the gingerbread man and sandwich that knot on the inside so we don't have to see that ugly knot. At this point, I'm taking my needle, I'm going behind the gingerbread man from back to front, right where that first stitch came through. Again, wrap your pinky and ring finger, but this time I don't want to pull it tight. I want to pull until I have a loop left. So leave a loop, and once I've left a loop, I'm going to go through that loop with my needle. When I pull, I want it to be snug against the paper, but obviously don't pull hard enough to rip the paper. Now my next stitch is coming from behind both layers again, just like you saw the first time. The same depth into the gingerbread man. I'm going to pull, but not the whole way. I'm going to leave a loop. In that loop, I'm going to take my needle through that loop, pull it snug. Next stitch, I'm going to go in from the back to the front through both layers. Remember when you pull to leave a loop. Needle through the loop, pull snug. This is what's called a blanket stitch. It's a very secure, well-designed looking stitch. So I'm just going to move up the arm here. Remember, don't pull it all the way tight. Take my needle through that loop that I made, and it makes a nice edge. I'm going to continue this all the way around my gingerbread man, leaving about a 1-inch opening. So a helpful hint, when we're stitching this, your gingerbread pieces can move around. So if you take a paper clip, you can ask me for one, you want to paper clip these two pieces together, somewhere that's out of your way, and then he won't slide around anymore. Now a reminder on that blanket stitch, I want to go from the back side up through the front, pinch the needle. When my needle comes through the paper, I'm wrapping my pinky and ring finger around it, and when I pull, I'm pulling till there's a loop left. That loop, I'm taking my needle through that loop, and I want to pull it until it's snug. At that point, I'm going to go ahead and take another stitch. Again, wrapping my pinky and ring finger, leaving a loop. Then I'm taking my needle through that loop that I left to pull it nice and tight to make your blanket stitch. Alright, so I've gotten to the point where my shorter tail is as long as my long piece here. I don't want to sew this into my stitching, so I'm simply going to hold my gingerbread man and pull my needle so that that tail gets shorter. A little bit shorter of a tail. And then I'll continue my stitch. Another reminder, from the back to the front through both layers, wrap your pinky around the tail, leave a loop. Put your needle through that loop, pull it away from you, and repeat. So I've been continuing my blanket stitch, and I got to the point where I have very little embroidery floss left. So I'm going to tie a knot and start with that piece I have left over. So what I want to do is remove that paper clip so that I can work in between my gingerbread man. And I want to come from the bottom up, but only through the back layer. So I'm going to go ahead, poke from the bottom side. There we go. Just through the back layer. So my needle is coming out in between front and back. Okay, once I've done that, I can go ahead and pull my, my needle off. So at this point, I want a knot to happen right in between there. So what I'm going to do, the easiest way, is to take 2 threads. We know that we're left with 3 here. We're going to take 2 threads into one of our hands and 1 thread into another. And I'm going to do a simple knot here. So I make an X. I make an X, just like that. I take one of the tails behind and through the loop. And I'm going to go ahead and pull it taut so it sits right in between those 2 layers. And I want to do this 3 times. So I made an X, took 1 loop behind, pulling it taut so the knot is in between my 2 layers. I'm going to go ahead and do this for the 3rd time. Okay, once I've done that, I'm going to grab my scissors. I'm going to cut some tails off. And I'm going to maybe use my needle to make sure that those tails are on the inside of the gingerbread man. I need to get my new needle ready. So I'm going to take that extra floss that I saved from before. Again, I'm going to trim a fresh edge. I'm going to pinch the end so you only see a little color. And I'm going to put the eye of the needle over that color so I can open my fingers and push the needle down to thread through the needle. Again, I have a short end and a long end. I'm going to tie a double knot at the bottom of the long end. So there's 1 knot. Remember, I want to make an awareness ribbon shape. And I want to pinch that intersection, take the loop behind and up through. I'm going to go ahead and push that knot so it lands right on top of that first knot. Okay. Next thing that I want to do is now, like when I started stitching, I want to go inside, take my needle inside, and I want to come up through the previous spot where I was stitching. So I came up through that place I already pierced through. If I have a longer tail, I want to go ahead and trim my tail at this point. And again, I can use my needle to push those tails inside. At this point, I want to go from the back side and up through that place where my thread is coming out from currently. I'm I'm going to pull through and leave a loop, take my needle through that loop, pull it tight. And I'm going to simply continue with my blanket stitch. So pull till you leave a loop, scoop through that loop, and keep on going. Alright, so I've continued my blanket stitch until I have a little bit more than an inch left in opening. At this point, I'm just going to set down my needle to the side, and I'm going to put a little bit of stuffing in, just a very tiny little bit. Now, if you already took your stuffing home, don't worry, we have plenty of extra here. Just ask for some of the extra. So what I want to do is carefully open up that opening, carefully so. Put a little bit of stuffing inside, just a little bit. And I'm sort of working this upwards. You can use the eraser side of a pencil if you're careful enough to work it towards the upper parts. So once I get a little bit, we're just giving a little bit of life to this guy. So I want to get a little bit in here. Going ahead and putting in just a tiny bit more. Now, one of the other shapes, like the circle or the heart, would be a little bit easier to get fluffier. So if you're looking for a fluffier final project, those would be some better choices. So again, I'm gently using this pencil to move the stuffing where I want it to be. Okay, so I'm ready to make my last stitch and tie the knot. So what I want to do for this last stitch is come from the back to the front through that first stitch hole that I made. And remember, like always, take your needle back through that loop and pull it taut. And now I'm ready for the knot. So this time, through that very hole I just stitched through, I'm going in from the back, but not through the front. I'm bringing the needle out so it's sandwiched between the front and back sides. I'm going to go ahead and pull the needle all the way. And I'm actually going to go ahead and pull the needle off the thread now. Now I'm going to tie that same type of knot I tied when I was ready to change thread earlier. So what I want to do is split it into 1 and 2 threads. I'm going to take the 2 thread, make an X. Then I'm simply going to put the 1 thread behind and through the loop. I'm going to go ahead and pull this tight so it ends up in between the gingerbread man's front and back side. I'm going to go ahead and make 2 knots. Pull it tight. Maybe even a third if you want to be extra secure. Okay, so once I've tied that tight, I'm going to go ahead. So I just trimmed my tail off, but you can still see the knot on the outside. So I'm going to take my needle and just kind of push and coax it to be inside of our gingerbread man or your heart or whatever shape that you're working on. Okay, now once I've done that, I made a nice little trinket. I can stitch through the top and make a loop so I could hang it up, or I could just keep it. I could draw a face on if I needed to. But there you go, you're completed.